Welcome everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today with Monika Crowley. I'm just allowing a few seconds here for people to log on. It takes a little while and we're getting up there now. We have a large number of people joining us today, which is really lovely. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to Monika Crowley, and today she's going to be talking about building your brand and other stories. And for those of you who've been with us through our series of webinars, you know the drill, that you type your question into the Q&A or chat box, and at the end, Monika will answer your questions as best she can. If you need more detail, I spoke to her beforehand, she's happy to take email inquiries from you, and we will be sending on Monika's presentation. So with that, the stage is yours, Monika.
Okay, thanks, Emer. Good afternoon, everybody out there that I can't see, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon. And I'm going to be talking to you about building your brand. And I'm aware that most of you already have a brand, possibly, and have been working as a craftsperson for probably quite a while. But hopefully I'll be able to give you a couple of tips that will allow you to take a step back and maybe refresh your brand, or possibly find a new way into talking about your brand story. So as I sat down to do this, I thought about, who am I? And I realized two things when I started this. One, I seriously need a haircut now that I see myself on Zoom. And two, that it's incredibly hard to talk about yourself and sell yourself. I'm a designer and an artist, and I spend a lot of time talking about other people's brands and other people's work. But when it comes to talking about yourself, it can be really hard to get the perspective and have enough distance to kind of see what is interesting about you to other people. So when my first attempt at telling you about me was this, it was like a big blurb from my CV, and I would see people dropping off the webinar if I started reading this to you, so I'm not going to. But the highlights of my background are that I studied industrial design in NCAD, but graduated in visual communications, and then worked as a graphic designer and a brand maker, brand builder for a couple of years with different design agencies and marketing agencies. From there, I made my way into advertising and worked my way up to being a creative director in an advertising agency. And then more recently joined a distributed media agency as a commercial content director. And that is a very long way of saying that I worked for an online publisher called Joe.ie and Her.ie, where I dealt with the commercial content for their sites. So enough about me. Hopefully we'll be able to take you through a few things that will help you get a better perspective and build your brand, just to make it a more consistent and stronger and more memorable place. So I'm going to talk to you under a couple of different headings. So all brands have various layers to them, and these are the headings I'm going to talk to you about. So about constructing your origin story. You probably already have this in some format. It's probably something that you tell people constantly. Maybe it's something that you're sick of telling people and you want to find a new angle into. We'll talk about your ethos, which should feed quite strongly into your brand, and your tone of voice, and the visual construct, which is your visual identity, how you translate from your logo to your packaging, to your website, to your social media. And the key thing is that all of these are coming from the same place and that have consistency through them. And that is what makes a stronger and more consistent and more memorable brand. Okay. So it's a brand new world. We're all brands. This is the era of the individual. So how do we find your brand and your story, something that's going to make you stand out? Sometimes I think it is good to think about your brand almost as an anecdote, and always remember when you're talking about your business or your brand that you're selling yourself, and that it's a sales pitch, and nobody's going to sit through a very long rigmarole. They just want to, if you think of it as an elevator pitch, every time you talk to someone, that when you walk away, they are left with one strong mental image or memorable thought or story about your brand. And when you're doing that in advertising, we talk about sell the sizzle, not the sausage. It's a very worn out and tired way of saying that basically big brands don't talk about the specifics of their product when they're trying to sell you something. They talk about the emotional aspect of it and tapping into the emotional experience. When people are in the shopping mode and purchasing mentality, you're trying to manipulate their emotions so that your brand is the one that they choose. Especially when it's something beautiful and crafted, tapping into the emotional aspect shouldn't be too hard, but it's harder than we think, I suppose. So to that, when you're talking about your origin story, if you think about it as that you have to grab people's attention quickly, telling a story is a way of making it more memorable, and tapping into the emotion are the key things. I often think of it as telling an anecdote. An anecdote, by its very definition, is telling a story in a short and interesting way about a real life incident or a real life person. And the key words there are short and interesting. We all have that person in the family that is the yarn spinner, and my sisters will attest that I'm probably that person in my family. And sometimes when I tell people about something that happened in our childhood, they're looking at me going, "It didn't happen like that." And I just tell them, but it's more interesting the way I tell it. So it's not about telling lies, but it's about how you tell the story that can make it more interesting. And we'll go into a bit more of that detail later. As an example of what I think is a really nice brand, I'm going to come back to Nobo. I just chose them as not quite a case study, but just as an example rather than jumping around. So you'll see that I'll unravel a couple of the layers of Nobo and just use them as my visual example. So in case you don't know them, Nobo are a Irish business. They make ice cream and chocolate with no dairy. So I really liked their look and their feels, very simple. And this quite grabbed me and kind of struck me when I read it. It says, "We are an Irish food business, started in 2012 with a borrowed ice cream machine and a bag full of avocados." And just the simplicity and of that sentence actually tells you a lot about them as a company. And it tells, it actually kind of hits you a little bit in the emotion that you immediately want them to do well when you hear the words borrowed, and you know, this is their startup and their startup story. So just when you're thinking about your origin story, ways to kind of look at this in different ways might be to sit down and think about, why did you start doing what you're doing right now? What are you really passionate about? What about what you're doing really gets you excited? And these are the things that you're going to find that makes you different. Why is what you're talking about interesting to your customers? You have to find a hook that's going to reel people in. And again, the hardest thing is, how do you describe this? How do you make this into an anecdote, say it in one sentence? And it could be, this could be any kind of different angle, but hopefully sitting down and thinking about these couple of points might give you a new way of looking at your brand. So if you think about it as storytelling, and that's interesting bits are going to be in the detail that is specific to you. So they're the kind of things that are going to make you stand out and make you more memorable. And what is wrapped up in your origin story will often be your ethos of what you stand for. I mentioned before about we're all brands, and how big brands, they don't sell you products, they like to sell you an experience. And nobody really is interested in hearing what Tesco have to say about this, or Vodafone have to say about that. Nobody likes being sold to. So you find that a lot of people, a lot of big brands out there, when they're talking to their consumers, they are talking about, we stand for the environment, or we stand for community, or we're supporting the Irish team. So you'll notice that everywhere, because nobody cares what a big brand is trying to sell you. But if you can hook people in with some kind of emotion, or some way that if I'm all about community, or if I'm all for the Irish team, then I'm going to be a little bit more interested about what you're saying. But that is not to say what you stand for. What you stand for could be being all about the environment. What you stand for could be just all about the sea, or about if one of the materials you use, it could be about gold, so if you're a jewelry maker, but it's not about the actual ore itself. Is it about your love of the material, or the emotion of how the first time you made a piece, or you held a piece, or tried on some other piece of jewelry, how that made you feel. So what you stand for is your statement, or your ethos. Sometimes it can be something that you reacted against, or something that you overcame, and that could be even, that you vowed that you would never work 9 to 5 for a big company again, and you set out to be an independent maker. And just think about how this manifests itself in your brand. How do you show this in everything you do in your everyday? So say I showed Nobo as an example earlier. I'm going to come back to them. So I feel are a brand that are quite good at living what they're all about. So they are very about the environment. They're about being wholesome, about being simple. They talk about treats reimagined and simplified and uncommonly delicious. And that's something that simplicity, I think, would be something that they stand for very clearly, both visually and in their language, and in everything they say that comes across. This is just a couple of posts I grabbed from their social media. So the first one, less is more, that's very clear that this is what they are all about. This is their ethos, both visually and ethically. Their packaging is all stripped back and unbleached cotton and very simple, even down to a little post that they have with their son playing with wooden balls. Whether this is staged or not, it doesn't even matter. It just shows that their family ethos, they're a small family run business, their family ethos is about simplicity and about sustainability as much as their company is, and that comes through in everything they do. Another tool in your toolbox for building your brand is about finding your right tone, finding the voice and trying to express it in some more personable way. Sometimes when we sit down at the computer to write about ourselves, we become all very flowery and technical, and you want to sound, you're selling a high-end product and you suddenly want to sound posh and a bit hyacinth bouquet. So sometimes you just need to take a step back from that and consider simplicity and how you sound as a person yourself. If you are, the maker of your company, some people will be at the forefront of their company if you're a smaller company, or if you're a slightly bigger company, it might be your brand might be more product or material specific. But throughout all of that, you need to think of how formal you really need to be. There is definitely a place on your website and further down in your brand building blocks to talk about the technical detail of what you do, but that is not when you're trying to reel people in or grab people's attention. If people want to know that information, they will go and find it. So try and strip too much technical detail out of your brand story. Sometimes it helps to consider, if your brand was a person or a celebrity, who would it be? And that might help you craft a tone of voice for it. Sometimes I say to consider humor. Humor is a very hard thing to do, and if it's not you, don't consider it. But sometimes it's good to be, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, and doesn't have to be so serious all the time. As Irish people, we're quite good at poking fun at ourselves, but you at the same time don't want to be too self-deprecating, because if you want to break into bigger markets, especially in the US, they don't really get self-deprecating humor, so be careful of that one. And when you're trying to craft your tone of voice, sometimes it helps just to start with small pieces. So if you consider a couple of your recent social media posts, or if you just wanted to craft a couple of things to write down quickly, try out a few posts that you could put up for different occasions, whether it is, you'll be looking at different selling occasions anyway around, everybody probably goes online for Mother's Day or, Christmas. There are different selling opportunities that you've all identified, I'm sure, in your brand journey so far. So to think about a couple of posts that can, if you're crafting a new brand tone, that these are a couple of sentences like that you can get it going. So just back to the example I was using, this just shows Nobo again. They've used different headings to craft what they're about. And this is from their website. So under the headings of what we want, what we believe, and sometimes it actually works to say what you're not about. That helps you craft what you are about. So one of the tools that, well, there's plenty of online tools that will help you figure out what you're about and what your tone is like. And it might help to go on to something like wordcloud.com, where if you have a lot of information written about your company and you finding it difficult to distill it down into very clear, simple sentences, take all that and paste it in there into word cloud, and it will give you a cloud pulling out the words that you most frequently use in a description of yourself. So I just did that for Nobo, and you can see, you know, simple, less treats and ingredients were the things that it pulled out. And you can see that this is something that actually already comes across on their website and on their social media and in their tone. It might help to actually create, even manually, to write down words that you do and don't use about your company. A lot of companies have brand books. Graphic designers would, if a graphic designer did your identity, they probably gave you a logo on how it looks in various ways, on photography, on your photography style, and possibly about the language you use. So it would help to have a visual representation of what language you do and don't use when you're talking about your brand, just to help you and whoever else works with you in the company. And then we come to the visual bit, which, because I'm a designer, I would kind of consider the easy bit, but you're all craftspeople and very visual people as well. So you probably know a lot of this already. I don't need to tell you that your identity and how you look, your website is your first impression. It's your window to the world, and how before you have said anything about your company, that people will have made, you'll already have made your first impression, and people will have started making up their mind about you before you say anything, by how you look. And I mean this in the sense of your website, that there should be consistency across photography, from website to social media. So I'm gonna look now at my case study example. It shows Nobo again, how their Instagram, I think Instagram is obviously very appealing for any craftspeople, any makers out there. It's a highly visual social media, and I'm sure most of you are on Instagram, but this shows Nobo, where they bring their dot motif throughout all their visual identity into their packaging. It's a, you know, even in the way they photograph everything, and the color palette comes across really clearly as well. Sorry. This even translates across their packaging, and I thought it was interesting when I saw their packaging around Christmas. And Christmas, we all know, is a highly commercial time of year, and people bring out the big guns and it's all glitz and glam. But for Christmas, Nobo brought out these selection boxes that are still very simple, sustainable cardboard, and a very simple but, you know, appealing visual identity for their Christmas cards. I just thought, again, it was a really charming way of doing something that stands out from all the glitz and glam that you normally see around Christmas. And here's just a couple of screen grabs off their Instagram profile. Again, you can see how it's consistent all the way through. They've picked like different occasions. So I think, you know, the green might have been around Easter time. I think the red might have been actually posted around Christmas, and then the other ones are maybe the blue or more from last summer. So it's just the clarity and the vision that is so simply translated across in everything they do, that I think you can see that one voice singing through from their tone, from their identity down to their photography of is so important. And then just one of the final things, I feel like I've raced through the presentation here, but I thought I'd keep it short and sweet. But one of the final things I just wanted to, I suppose, hammer home was that as makers, you should always be on the lookout for opportunities to tap into the cultural zeitgeist, which is so cliche that I can't believe I wrote that down as a heading. But look for opportunities that your brand is relevant to. We're all, you know, aware of different occasions like Easter and Christmas and different selling opportunities, but just look for ways that, look for people talking about things that you say, oh, actually, do you know what? My brand fits their brand. I'm going to talk to them. So insert yourself into cultural conversations and get to know all the media types in the times when they're talking about, you know, what's hot. These are all things that you should be constantly sharing and tagging and hashtagging and at people in media, and when you're talking about your brand that is relevant in that culture. I know at the moment it's quite difficult to get that tone right, you know, and you don't want to make your brand in some way like you can't take the tone that is just about now. So, but it's about tapping into cultural conversations at different times where your brand is relevant. So that was just a couple of ideas on how to look at your brand in different ways and hopefully make it a little bit more memorable, or that gives you tools to take a step back and find a different origin point for telling new stories about your brand. So if there was any questions there.
Monica, thank you so much for that. That was really a clean and stylish and very informative presentation. I have one here. Someone would like examples of hooks. Could you give a few examples of hooks, please?
Of hooks? Yeah. I suppose what I mean by hooks, well, what I would mean by that is, say, back on the Nobo page where it talked about, you know, we started out in 2012 with a borrowed ice cream machine and a bag full of avocados. That is just, it sounds like the setup of the anecdote, and that is the setup of their story, the hook that is going to keep people listening to what you actually have to say. So it's an interesting statement that's going to draw people into your brand story.
Okay, someone is saying, you're getting a lot of praise here, by the way. Wonderful presentation and very helpful about ethos in particular. Someone is asking, is .com essential?
I don't think so. I think like the world is big enough at this point that people understand, you know, that you're a smaller brand if you're .ie. I think being online is essential, but and being on social media, I think, is essential for small makers, especially for everyone, for every brand. All artists generally not all artists have stopped selling off. All artists are on Instagram talking about their work. It gives a more informal way for people to get to know your brand. I often find I might go to Instagram first to find out about someone before I would go to their website to maybe purchase.
Okay, okay, that's good. What we have here is someone who's saying that they're going to look at their social media, etc., in a whole new light. So that's great. You know, if we've got one thing out of today, that's really good. I have someone else. They're making handmade soap. Okay, they want to promote it at present, but they don't want to be disrespectful to people. So, would you have any hints on that?
I know it's a very tough time to. I suppose you have to mind your tone, and that some people are going to be offended if you are too glib about what is going on at the moment out there. But I don't think I would shy away from the opportunity of selling beautiful handcrafted soap. Especially, I think your time is now. I would definitely be a little bit shameless about selling it, and I'm sure it's a lovely high quality product. I and my kids' hands are raw from using cheap soap or washing our hands so often. So it's been actually in my head is like, I must find some really good quality soap. So I think people are going to be looking for products like that. So I wouldn't worry too much. Just, you know, be respectful to people. Maybe this is an opportunity to just really talk about the quality of your product.
Okay, I have another question here relating to tagging with celebrities or people in the media. What's acceptable and what's the best way to approach this?
Yeah, this is something that everybody, it's a fine line. To be honest, I would say be a little bit shameless and just, I tend to tag people. Don't overdo it that you're tagging them in every post, but if you thought, okay, this might be something that would be of interest to this person, I'll tag them and share at them. I mean, we're so used to getting tagged and, you know, posts being shared at us that if it's not of interest to you, I think you'll just gloss over it, and I don't think you'll be annoying somebody by, you know, asking them to engage with your product.
Okay, do you think that Facebook is losing traction to Instagram?
As a visual artist, I tend to use Instagram a lot more. I definitely think it's a stronger and more visual place. Uh, I think Facebook is worth being on as well. Actually, if I'm ever sharing anything about myself as an artist, I would share it on Instagram, and then often it will ask me, you know, do you want to share this post to Facebook as well? It's kind of a second thought for me, but I think it's important just for a brand to be consistent across all of social media, and it's quite easy to link them up so that when you're sharing on one, you're sharing on the other.
Okay, okay. A lot of thank yous, a lot of great praise, you know, coming through. You're very popular today, which is brilliant. This person makes ceramics, and she likes to make it in different styles. Would you suggest choosing one style to stick to, or having two brands, for example, two separate sculpture and jewelry brands? So if this person's making sculpture and jewelry, that they be two separate brands, or how would you view that?
Yeah, that's if they are quite different, and you know, if that might be an opportunity to talk about yourself as an artist if you are the maker, and that you have these two streams. I suppose it depends how different they are. It could make quite, it could double the work for you to be posting and sharing different brands all the time. But if um, if you feel they're quite they don't sit well together, it might be no harm to separate them out.
Okay, that's very informative. I have another one here, and you're getting constant praise, by the way, so that's good. Monica, you're obviously getting the message home. Is there a pathway to take to develop and roll out a brand from concept to launch and then maintain it?
Sorry, what was the beginning of the question there?
Okay, is there a pathway that one can take to develop and roll out a brand from the concept? And then how do you maintain that?
Yeah, a lot of people, there are a lot of graphic designers and brand people out there that can help you on this journey. It's quite a difficult thing to sit down and do yourself. If you are, I'm just going to say, a ceramicist. If you're a ceramicist, sometimes it would be easier to engage the the expertise of somebody who's used to dealing with brands every day, and by having somebody else do it for you, you tell them all your information and they can get that perspective and get that distance in distilling what your brand is about and what is going to be interesting to your customers. So I definitely think getting a graphic designer to help you on that journey is the right way to go.
Okay, I have another one here, and this has been a recurring theme through the webinars. The Generation Z young people that I know have been repeatedly saying to me that TikTok would be a great platform for engaging the next generation in craft and craft development and letting them see how meaningful it is. And this person is kind of reiterating that. Is TikTok relevant for Irish designer makers as a channel? And they're saying that 18 to 24-year-olds are not his customers at present, I suppose, and they appear to be the biggest users of it. So what would you think of that as a platform?
I think TikTok, people are still finding their way with it. I'm quite new to TikTok myself, I have to say, but I have noticed if I sent a video to someone recently and they were saying, oh yeah, my son was telling me he saw that on TikTok earlier, and it is possibly what's been shared a lot now. I think the video I sent was how to make a face mask. So it can be relevant at the moment. I don't know if it's really relevant as a sales platform. It might be relevant to be there and have a presence there about building your brand. But if you don't have everything else right, I don't know if I would worry about TikTok right now. I think there are a lot of fundamentals that you need to get working, and I think you can do that rather than wasting time trying to get on the latest social media platform. Maybe concentrate on building your brand on some of the longer existing ones like Instagram or Facebook.
Okay, that's comprehensively answered. I've got one here. Again, another compliment, wonderful interesting presentation, and thank you. Could you expand on what are cultural conversations?
Oh, cultural conversations. So I suppose at the moment, the cultural conversation that's happening is around COVID-19, and everybody's talking about that. So that's what I would mean about a cultural conversation. The Olympics were meant to be on this year, and even at the beginning of the year, you probably saw brands on TV advertising around the Olympics. And that would have been a big cultural conversation happening all across the world this summer. So what I mean is, I suppose, big events that are happening, and it could be down to Paddy's Day. you know, what's the conversation that's happening around Paddy's Day, and is there some way that you can tap into Paddy's Day without just sharing something green, you know, and make your brand relevant in some way, you know, in the way that, say, a florist would see Mother's Day as, this is going to be a big selling opportunity for me, so they would gear up way before Mother's Day and start tapping into the Mother's Day cultural conversation.
Okay, Monica, my connection is unstable, so what I'm going to go with another couple of questions. If you lose me, Mary, would you kindly please take over for me if I go into the ether somewhere?
Yeah.
Okay, here we have, this is a brilliant presentation. Thank you, Mary. Final question. Would you recommend using your real name or having a separate brand name? This person is finding in Ireland / UK, many people use their real names, while in the US, they use a separate brand name. What do you think?
Well, I think your brand name is your company name. I think it's good to have a brand name if it's something you see getting bigger. You know, your studio, it turns into a bigger collective. Now I know you have some craft makers like I don't know, Joseph Walsh, and you know, artists that are, their brand name and their own personal name are the one and the same. But I think either or can work really well. If you have a brand name, you're able to maybe put a couple of different products under that brand name. When your brand is you as a person, it can be a little bit more disconnected. So it depends on person to person. It's quite hard to give advice and not really knowing who it is that's asking the question. But I often think that having your brand name and then you as the artist and the maker is there at the forefront of the brand as well, can work quite well.
That's great, really good. Okay, someone's asking about the old-fashioned way to build a brand. Door to door and less social media. This person's a milliner, an educator, and that's the way they set up their business.
Well, I think that every brand needs to do an element of that. I think it's the human connection is really important, and actually meeting people face to face. Obviously, at the moment, we can't do that, and online is your biggest opportunity for getting known. But I don't think you could rely on just that approach in, like, not just in the current climate, but I think in this day and age, you absolutely need to have a website. You need to be on social media, and you need to be talking about your brand and getting other people talking about your brand to build it and to get to the next level and to grow your business.
Okay, right. If you haven't a website yet, should you be overly launching your work as if you haven't had a website to direct them to yet? But should you still be active but not putting designs out? And this person had a shop which will be opening again soon. Okay, I'll reread that again. Okay, if you haven't a website yet, should you be overly launching your work as you haven't a website to direct them to? Okay, and
sorry.
Yeah, still be active but not putting designs out. And this person has a shop which will open again soon.
Okay, well, it's very simple to set up your own website, although, you know, there's lots of free different ways. Like I say, it's quite simple. I've done it myself, that you can sit down and spend, it would take a day to get something up online. But if you didn't want to build a website yet, or if you just didn't have the time. A lot of people are working from home with their children, and it's impossible to get that day to get a website live. I think on social media, it's no harm to get stuff out there and just constantly reiterate the message that your shop will be open again soon. Here is what's coming that you can go see in person hopefully soon, and that in the near future you might be launching a website where people can buy online. I think if you're sharing on social media, people can DM you, they can direct message you there on Facebook or on Instagram if they're interested. A lot of artists actually sell directly through Instagram nowadays rather than driving people to a website. Because to be honest, if you're talking to people on social media, they almost want the opportunity of buying there and then rather than having to click off and go to another place to buy.
Okay, well answered. Someone here is launching a luxury scarf brand this year. And what stroke where is the best way to find where customers will buy?
A scarf brand?
Yeah, luxury scarf brand.
Luxury scarf brand.
It's about customer research. They want to know what or where is the best way to find where their customers will buy, what platforms they're using.
Okay. Well, I suppose the way to find that out is just to start the conversation. So start posting on Instagram. I often find people put up say a post, but it can be helpful to ask a question. If there is information you want from people, you know, why not ask the question on Instagram of like, you know, here are 2 scarves coming from my next line, you know, which are you? Are you the green one or are you the blue one? And find that kind of engagement from people. I think it would be really helpful to just email and get to know a few people in media. If it's a brand that you're launching, it might be worth talking to people in magazines. You know, you'll see in the magazines who are the journalists to talk to, and you find them and tag them, or if you send samples into different press, it can actually be quite a helpful thing. It's kind of exhausting doing your own PR and your own sales and everything, but when you're a one-man band, it's something you have to think about. I suppose if you knew anyone or vaguely knew anyone in terms of, this is the era of celebrity, so a lot of people would pinpoint who they see as like, you know, this would be a good shop window for me. I'm gonna actually send a scarf to this person and ask them to wear it, and if they like it, sometimes they will, and they'll post about it on their social media as well.
Okay, I'm going to end on this question, and it's a question that's coming through from a couple of people, but also for my own knowledge going into the future. How important is a domain name?
How very important.
Very important. Key. Okay.
Yeah,
absolutely key.
I think it's people finding you. You know, it has to. You can't have something that's a little bit abstract unless, like, it has to be your name or your company name, your product name, and that is, you know, how people are going to find you, and that's how people are going to search for you. So I think going too abstract on your domain name, I think, you know, can be a bad decision.
Okay, so simple, straightforward, reflecting the brand. So I hope that answers the questions that people have had on domain name. Okay, I think that's it. Monica, I am absolutely delighted you joined us today. I'm very thankful for our colleague Ciara Garvey's recommendation. It's been a pleasure, and I'm delighted that we had such a large audience today joining us, and I'd like to thank Mary Dunn for all her wonderful technical support. So thank you very much.
Thank you.